Hi, I'm Anthony Barr, a managing director at Strategex. And today we want to talk about the Net Promoter Score and how it is incorrectly being used to support B2B M&A transactions. Quick introduction, Strategex specializes in leveraging the 80/20 toolkit to help achieve profitable market share growth. And to date, we've generated more than $2 billion in incremental operating income for our clients. And we have also supported hundreds of M&A transactions. I have a love-hate relationship with NPS. When done correctly, it can be incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, in the B2B space, there is a huge blind spot in how NPS is being calculated, which can lead investors to make decisions which can cost them millions of dollars. When conducting due diligence on a B2B target, it is essential to validate the strength of customer relationships and verify that the revenue base is secure. Why is this essential? Because it is well documented that 70 to 90% of deals fall short of expected returns. And one of the most common causes of B2B deal failure is customer concentration risk. Imagine if post-close, a key account were to leave or even lower their spend. There would be a material impact on the company's financials, and many may never fully recover. So NPS is an effective risk measurement tool because it objectively and empirically helps investors determine the strength of customer relationships. And when NPS is combined with qualitative insights, it can also be an effective risk mitigation tool, since it helps management teams understand exactly what must be done in the first 100 days post-close to secure any accounts that might be at risk. Personally, what I love about NPS is just how simple it is, right? The score is derived by asking one question: how likely would you be to recommend company X to a colleague? Those answering 9 or 10 are promoters. Those answering 7 or 8 are passives. And those answering 0 to 6 are detractors. Now, the score itself is calculated by taking the percentage of customers who are promoters and subtracting from that the percentage of customers who are detractors. So the score can range anywhere from -100 to +100. -100 if all of your customers are detractors, +100 if all of your customers are promoters. Now, a common question is, what's a good NPS, right? And that's a tricky question to answer, and there are a lot of different perspectives and benchmarks out there. However, almost everyone would agree that a Net Promoter Score of +82 is a great score, right? An investor considering a target company with a +82 NPS should feel really good about its ability to retain and sustain the revenue base, since the score tells us that most customers are promoters and that there probably aren't systemic issues with the customer experience. On the other hand, almost everyone would agree that a NPS of -14 is a terrible score. An investor considering a target company with an NPS of -14 would almost certainly walk away from the deal, or at a minimum, reconfigure the deal to ensure they are protected from systemic downside risk. Now, the shocking thing about these two numbers is that both of them, +82 and -14, were generated by the same target company with which we recently conducted due diligence. Probably asking, how is this possible? And the answer is that one of these scores is weighted and one of these scores is unweighted. It was Leonardo da Vinci that said simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And while I love NPS for how simple it is, the truth is in the B2B world, it's perhaps a bit too simple to be a sophisticated management tool. And the reason it's too simple is because it ignores revenue concentration, which is omnipresent in the B2B world. There's really no escaping it. What we're looking at here are actual figures for the target company I just mentioned. And while they have 213 customers in total, the top 25% of the customer base, right, the top quartile of their customer base, generated 97% of revenue. In fact, the top 3 accounts alone generated nearly 50% of revenue. Conversely, the entire bottom half of the customer base, so over 100 accounts, collectively generated less than 1% of revenue. So this pattern is something that we observe in almost every B2B company that we work with, and calculating NPS the traditional way ignores this. Traditional NPS would say all of these customers carry the same weight in the calculation, which we think is fundamentally flawed. If we have a handful of accounts that matter, which we call the critical few, shouldn't they carry more weight in the score than all of the accounts that don't matter as much, which we call the insignificant many? Because the truth is, customer number 1 generated 10,000% more revenue than customer 213. And even in quartile 1, those top accounts, there's still a stratification. Customer number 1 generated 8x more revenue than customer 53. So if we're not giving each customer revenue the appropriate share of voice in the NPS calculation, we're doing it wrong. It shouldn't look like this. It should look like this, so that each customer's share of voice in the score is proportionate to their importance. And when you do it this way, the results are sometimes shocking. Here's that same target company. When we look at their weighted versus unweighted results side by side, you see that on an unweighted basis, we get a score of plus 82. But when we take into account that those top 3 accounts, which remember are 50% of revenue, they're 50% of the story, all 3 of them were detractors, which drastically lowers the NPS and gives us a much more accurate understanding of the current health of the revenue base. It seems like every week there's a new article floating around that either praises or criticizes NPS, and both sides of the conversation make very valid points. We can't speak for the consumer world, but in the B2B space, part of the reason NPS has come under scrutiny is because it ignores concentration risk. And in doing so, it becomes less descriptive of the current state of the revenue base, and it becomes less predictive in helping investors model the future growth outlook. So next time you're looking at a B2B Net Promoter Score, ask yourself, is this score telling me the story of the insignificant many, or is it telling me the story that matters, which is the story of the critical few? And finally, we should mention this is not unique, right? As I said, we see this pattern holds true with nearly every target, every portfolio company out there. If you haven't done an analysis like this on your own, we encourage you to do so because it can be really eye-opening, and it will help you realize that every business has those critical few, every business has those insignificant many. The real question is, which of those segments are driving your decision-making? Thanks for your time, and reach out with any questions.